So, really quick, hello everybody. New session of Holochain-in-Action. Community gathering of the Holochain. Each and every week, we are meeting each other, talking about the Holochain architect, application, design, and so on and so forth. So if you would like to participate, especially if you are from other communities or other projects, warm welcome to go to the description or forum.holochain.org and let us know that you would like to join and continue the process. So in this session, we are going to talk about the validations in Holochain application, especially because there are some new changes in the code. It means we have some new way, or we have some new way cannot be good. Something is changed. So you need to implement your validations if you already implemented in a new fashion. So today we are going to review also the blog that pulled out published recently to see what is there. And thanks to Eric, that Eric implemented some validations in his own application attestation. We are going to take a look at the application to see how the thing is working. And I can guess some topic like when to use validation, how to use it is gonna come up. And also warm welcome to the friends who are here right now. And we already did checking. So that's it. I'm going to share my screen to open the topic, and then I think Eric also can join us, or other DM can say what's happening. Let me share my screen. So, okay, blog, okay. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
So it is the blog that big HTK changes. So from this version, it means 00127 new validation approach is there. So there are some changes that you can read and look through to see what is there, all in all. So basically, because it is a little bit long that I'm not going to read all of them right now, generally, right now, validation is based on the operations. So it is different than the previous version or a previous way of validation that we are going to open the topic. We are going to go to the detail. What does it mean? But in a really quick overview, it is this one. It means the validation is sending you operation. So that I believe it is really close to CRDTR, CRDT. Am I right about the conflict-free
data structure? Yeah.
Yes, because on a validation, we are receiving operations. And what does it mean, operation? It is the things I would like to start to talk about it. It means in the HDK, we have a create entry, update entry, delete entry, and create link and delete link. So, and they can be, each of them can be a few operation on DHT. So we are going to talk about this one right now, but I already have the code of attestation here. What do you think? And Eric, if you would like to review your code yourself, or I can review and read it quick and then open the conversation and discussion. What do you think?
As you like.
Yeah. That is really quick. Attestation, I'm going to share the link in the description. What is attestation? It is the project that Eric Harris Brown already explained it in the GitHub repository. It is not the main topic, but really soon we are going to have another standalone session for that. But anyway, as you can see, it is the validation. So operation is going to be sent. These are the operations: a store element, a store entry, register update, register delete, register agent activity, register created link, and register delete link. So here, when this validate is calling, it means on any HDK function that we are calling for the validation operation, per each operation, this function is going to be called, and we are supposed to put a switch case here. Generally in Rust is match, but we are calling switch. So to see what operation is coming and then write some validation. For example, here we can see on this one, Eric always a valid on a store element. It means valid this one, it is okay. A store entry valid this one. If it is register create link, it means if you are creating a link from the base to target with some extra info, there are some conditions, for some of them valid or for some condition invalid. So all in all, it is the way and the fashion you can write your validate function or your validation rules. The things that right now I can start the, so is there any question so far? Because then I can go to the valid topic and question that we can say, hey, HDK function like a create entry, as you see in the, let me, why? In the blog or in the developer holochain.org, which is a help you can read, all of them are not mapped. First of all, we need to understand what's happening for each, what is the mapping between the HDK function and the operations. The one which is explaining here. So it can be the first question. So how they are mapping and how a developer can see when there is a delete entry, what operation are going to be called.
Hidayat, I think it's useful. I sent a link in the chat. If you wanna, do you want me to share my screen or?
For sure. If actually I open the question that we can step by step fill out this one and continue the conversation. It means what's happening on each function, how the mapping is working. If you can, please.
Right. This is a table from one of the earliest blog posts about RSN, which is actually the table that you wanted to fill, I think. Right? Can you see it?
Yes, I see it. Yes.
Right. So from each operation on the left, in the middle, you have all the DHT operations that are produced by that action. Right?
Amazing.
Am I right? This is the table that you wanted to produce.
Exactly, and amazingly that is true.
Yeah, cool. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's useful even to reconstruct the table to understand a bit. I don't know. What do you want to do at this stage?
So I would like to map a step by step with some example that how a developer is supposed to look at the topic. So how the things is working with the code. It means with the topic and with the code. And because we can go to the code and to see what does it mean create entry, what's happening, what is the create entry. If you can also open it and you can review both of them, or I have the code, up to you. A step by step. Let's go to all of them to see when the create entry is happening, this operation is going to be called. So a developer would receive this validation function and how a developer should think about operation instead of data.
Yep.
So it is the topic. Ready?
Like I don't have the code, so if you want to share your screen and maybe.
Yes, I will share the screen like always. I'm going also to give you control of my desktop. But anyway, the photo that you show me, is it public that anybody can access? I think.
Yeah, I sent the link in the chat.
It was a Medium. Okay, so got the point. So
I have one high level question.
Yes.
I assume that the validation ops is documented in the HDK documentation, but I'm having a little trouble finding it. If someone
It is.
in the chat
It
as
is.
well.
Search for ops.
Yep.
The thing that's not documented, and I was getting on their case, the first thing when this came out is the function that calls. So if you search for validation, you won't find it. But if you just search for OP, you'll find the link.
Yeah, it is here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. I just wanted to see it in the docs, but I found it now. Thank you, Eric. I'll post a link in the chat.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Great.
That is great. So I'm going to put this link also in the description, video description. So let's read the code, what's happening. So in the lib also, let me give permission of the desktop if you need. So
what I'll maybe a little bit of background would be helpful. There's one other thing I'd like to share about this, just to contextualize all this. It's fine to have that open. The big difference is the way we were doing validation before was from the perspective of the person from the agent who was committing the validation, right? So there were callbacks for what you have in your list of create link and create entry. But really the right way to be doing it. And so then what you had to do as a developer is you had to think about on the other side, when this is being received on some part of the DHT, which context am I in right now to do my validation? And this makes it explicit which context you're in as a validator, where you are in the DHT, which role you're playing. Everybody is playing a different role as a validator. And that I think is
Eric, your microphone I think went to an issue.
My microphone goes low. Is that better? Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is having is being able to think as a developer from which role on the DHT the validation rule needs to be run. And so this makes that explicit and a lot easier to think about.
Again, the microphone went down, but let us review that. Let me at least to see that did I understand correctly. So in that way, it means when a developer writing the validation rules, it is not about the data, it is about the operation and the role that an agent is running that node. So yeah.
I think it's useful if I just share the playground for a minute, and because we can see exactly what we are talking about there. Okay, so can you see this?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to switch on step by step. So this is a Holochain DHT. Let's imagine that Sandy creates an entry.
Yeah, can you do a favor, please? There's zoom, your right panel is zoom, and it is the black under it. Can you remove it or go to another X?
Is it yet? Yep. Okay. So Sandy creates an entry, right? Okay. Execute, and now the Zol is step by step. Ooh, seems like I have a bug, and this is unfortunate. Step by step, please. Yes. Oh, it seems I have a bug. Okay, so I can't do the step by step, but if you see, Shayla is going to create an entry, and then things are going to be flying around. Okay, I'm going to have it very slow so that we can see. And these are the different DHT operations, right? So Sheila is creating. And now you see, this is a store entry that goes into that side of the DHT. That's a DHT op. And then Larissa, Paulina, and Adrienne run the validation for that operation, for the store entry, not all the other DHT ops that were flying around, right? So what Eric was saying is that Larissa is the one that's going to run the validation, but she doesn't have to run the validation for all the other DHT operations, just the one that she received, right? Which is the store entry in that case. Was this useful? I'm not sure this was as useful as I hoped for because of the step-by-step.
No, that was great. It means, can we stay there? It means create entry, produce 3 operations: publish header, publish entry, and agent activity. We are going to take a look. Larissa, Paulina, and Adrian that you mentioned, they are going to be the neighbor of the operations.
Exactly.
In the neighborhood. So, and it is fantastic because we are going to talk about this neighborhood. But before continue the discussion, let me remind actually anybody also visited that the neighborhood, it is not about a physical neighborhood. It means if the hash of the Larissa is close to hash of the header or entry or something, it is a neighborhood in the hash, not a neighborhood in physical location. So that's it.
Yeah. In this case, Larissa, Paulina, and Adrian, you see them as yellow because I have selected the entries. So they are the neighborhood of the entry, and they are the ones validating the store entry DHT op, right? Not the other ones that you mentioned.
Great. So we can continue the create entry. So in the create entry, there are, please, Imran.
Sorry, just got a quick question.
Please.
So on the topic of the difference between before the validation, was the validation not split up maybe not in DHT ops, but it was split up between read, create, update, and delete, right? So when you're talking about separation of DHT op, are you talking about when you create an element, there's several DHT ops within that creation operation?
Did you see them fly out? Because that's exactly what happens. The part of the DHT that's holding the data gets one operation. The part of the DHT that is responsible for watching an agent's activity to prevent chain forking gets a different DHT op. It gets the agent activity op. The part that is storing the headers, well, the header part is what helps you protect against forking your chain. And so that would be, I think that's the store element op that it's going to get. And so you would validate things for that. There is another thing that you have to remember is that a lot of the basic stuff is checked by the subconscious. So you don't have to do things like check to see that the shape of the data is the correct shape of the data. What you have to check is that the contents of the data match what your application is doing. And then the behavior of this occurring is matching the behavior that's appropriate.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
So, should I continue? Is there any questions so far? I really would like to go step by step in all of them so that can help anybody. Oh, I think I shared the wrong screen. Okay, do you see my screen? Okay, great. So it is the link that Guillaume sent me that I'm going to share. So it is the article of Arthur Brock, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, we are going to fill out this one. Publish header, publish, let me see, is there equal? Because this one is coming from here. So, but maybe it is not valid. So what's happening in, where is it? Create entry, publish header, publish entry, agent activity. Register agent activity, a store element, and a store entry. This one is close to the code. So it means a store element. So let's say I'm going to create entry, okay? What happened? Which one is going to happen? Based on the document, I'm supposed to, for any create entry, this 3-time validation I'm supposed to receive and work on it. Am I right? So,
yep.
Okay, it means a store element, a store element. Let me go to a store element. to see what's happening there. It is here. Store a new element DHT. There is a creating a new blah blah. So by the way, briefly, element contains it is the combination of header and entry, and both of them are element. So why do we need to validate element? It means we can validate header, we can validate entry, and we can validate header. What is the philosophy? What do we need to validate element? Both of them together. What kind of validation we can do?
I don't really understand the question. What do you mean? Like, what kind of validation? Like, what it would be good for this store element? Like, what a validation you would put in the store element op, or what
Yes,
exactly?
what do we need? Because element is the combination of header, which is the action or what happened. The header can be header can be delete, can be initial. Where is the header? If you can give me the header, and I can HTK show the header. So it means we can validate header. So my question that when I receive the store element, it means I'm supposed to validate the element. Element, it means the header and the entry. Yes. So well, but we have two other operations, one for validate header and one for validate entry. Here, a store entry, and there was header.
No, there is no header. Like, the element is the header.
So, okay. Okay, I got it.
So in this case, I think what you would end up doing is you would end up validating in that context some of the same things that you would validate about the entry. So this person, you would run the same thing. That agent in the DHT would run the same check as another agent on the DHT would run, but they might run more. They would more checks. They would talk about the relationship between the header and the entry. Like, so it might be able to check some things about, was this deleted? Did the content, is there any, like, what happens if you are in a rollback situation or not? Can you check against that? But you can't do that in the case of just storing the entry, or you don't need to do that in that case.
Okay, but the question that, because header can totally have a different hash from the entry. It means the neighborhood, the people who are receiving the hash header can be different than the hash of entry. So which one is receiving as both of them? It means it is a little bit confusing to me, because element, it is both of them are inside. Did you get my question?
No, are you talking about who's receiving it?
Yes.
So that chart that you see right there describes who's receiving it. And so the thing on the left is the targeted hash basis that tells you which hash on the DHT gets that particular type of op. So the register agent activity is by, let me see, is by the delta K. So K refers to the DHT entry, which is the public key of the author whose chain was published from. So this is people who are close to you as the author. You're all going to be getting this information to store about what the author did. For the store entry, the people who are the neighborhood that's going to be getting this to validate are people whose hash is close to the hash of the entry. And for the store element, the people who are getting it are the people who are close to the hash of the header.
For the store element, hash of the header. Okay.
Yeah. So Yeah. So here I can just paste and see if this will work. Well, so this particular bit of the doc here, let me just share my screen here.
Sure.
So this is in the formalization document, which we need to actually publish. So this part that you're seeing is this part of the chart, and here is the first part of the chart, which is which hash. It describes the agents whose hash are close to what are receiving the DHT up. Right, and so for example, with update entry, a lot of people need to be able to validate stuff. The people who stored the previous one, or who are responsible for validating the previous entry plus the new one. That's why you have E prime. E prime refers to the previous existing entry type. And this is just like a formal way of describing who's receiving that. For the most part, most of these different people are going to be doing things like, in the case of updating an entry, you're going to be checking that the thing that's updated was actually there before, that you actually had it. You know, there's other things like that you might be doing before you can't update something that didn't exist.
Yes.
Or there may be conditions on which you can update something, like maybe this thing can only be updated for a certain period of time, or it may only be updated to something, or you may be checking to see who is doing the updating. Is the person who's doing the updating somebody who is illegally allowed to update something in your data model?
So I have a question here. Is there order in the operation that we are receiving, or it doesn't matter? What is the order?
There can be no order. This is a distributed system. It all goes out, right?
That's it. And
it's eventually consistent.
Eventually consistent.
Right. And so the person who's sending out these DHT ops will resend them until things are confirmed. But yeah.
And another question. So can we right now query the DHT in the validations?
What do you mean? What's the question?
Can we query DHT inside the validation block?
What you can do is you can do a must get.
Must get. So
yeah, you can't do a regular get because it has to be deterministic. And so what a must get means is that it will return a value. It will return a value, or the whole thing will just disappear, and it'll get called again some other time when it can. Because remember, all your validation has to be deterministic. So
yes.
When you do a must get, it will always return, or the whole thing will be short circuited, and the validation will be run again later when the thing that you were looking for is findable.
What are the deterministic topics and what are not deterministic? Because we have entry and we have links. And what are the things that they are deterministic and what are the non-deterministic?
Well, so it's not deterministic that something exists on the network, right? So that is a non-deterministic thing, and so the only thing that we can do is rerun again later, because you're saying that I want this to exist, but you can't know that it does exist, right? That is a non-deterministic thing. But I'm not quite sure I understand the question about what is non-deterministic.
Please, Hannah.
Sorry, something I heard in Hidayat's question was, we can query about entries. Can we query about links?
I don't think we can, because I think that does not work. But let's take a look at must and see what we have available to us.
Gian, please, what do you want?
Yeah, like in general, anything that you have the hash for will be deterministic, and anything that you don't have the hash for will not. So imagine if you have a link, right? And the link has this base and this target. If you have the base, you means that you have the hash, you can do a must get. That's deterministic. What you cannot do is get links, because get links, it's not, you're not trying to get some content for some hash, right? So in general, get links, not in validation, no. Get entry element, that's totally fine. And also get agent activity will be fine in the future because it will be hash bounded. So you, sorry?
Yeah, and you can also get a header. But see, the thing is, yeah, so I see what you mean. You can't get links because there's no deterministic way to know if the links that you would come back are the ones that you would want to validate with, right? Because you don't know which links are on there. You can't, the point by deterministic means that two different people, if they ask the same question, they should get the same answer. And get links, the answer will not be deterministic because different people may respond differently to that.
Yeah, and just to spell out part of what is being said here, a link has no hash. It has no identity that you can say, give me this link, or at least, is that true?
Actually, it does, like the header does have a hash, right? So when you do create link, that creates a header, that header has a hash. And if you have the hash of that header, you can do a get on that header, right? The problem is you normally, what you do with links is get links, get me all the links for this entry hash. So you start with the entry hash, not with the link hash. And that's crucial.
The link singular is deterministic. The links plural is non-deterministic.
Yep.
If for some reason in my validation, I had access to the link header, then I could get the link and use that link in my validation as I chose.
Exactly.
But in normal architecture, we're not normally thinking of storing a link and its address via its header, I think. Is that basically usually true so far?
I would say so, yeah. But like in some edge cases, you would actually get the header, link header link and store it in an entry, for example.
Great, thank you.
I just got another question for the validation within the callback. So I noticed when looking at must get entry header valid element, there's no option for a hash bound query. Is that in the works, or like my question would be like, if I need to query a bunch of entries, let's say a whole data structure them, how would I do that? Yeah, because I think like doing it just a must get on each individual would be pretty taxing.
Yes, so Eric, maybe you know more about this, but hash bounded queries are not there yet, but they are in the works. But the only thing that you will be able to do is get me headers from this hash to this hash for this agent. Right? That's the only question that you can ask. All the other questions you have to ask individually, like do a bunch of must gets.
Yeah, and that's because the people who are storing the agent activity are the people whom you're asking that of. So you can ask that of anybody who's in the neighborhood of the agent who created that, and they should have all of those headers. They should have all of the headers of what that agent created, and so they should be able to return that to you. Otherwise, there's no single place that can get that.
Gotcha. Okay. So to kind of summarize, then, using a hash-bound get entry would be kind of like using the sub package. I forgot what was the name. There was like a portion of the validation package, which was author chain, right? Okay.
It's very similar to doing a query on your own chain for your own stuff that you might do. It's the same thing. It's just you, instead of getting it from your own chain, you're getting it for somebody else's chain over the network.
Gotcha. Okay.
Eric, you wanted to share something? That's it. So, okay, generally, in brief, deterministic and non-deterministic. Deterministic, it means anybody can run and can say, yes, we are reaching to the same conclusion. We assure that the query is going to be ended up to one place if a few agents are gonna run that query. So to achieve that one, we need to query something with a specific hash, data with hash, like entry. Or if it is a link, we need to have the header, the hash of the link. That's it. They are deterministic. If a developer writing the validations, they need to know that the deterministic query, that it is sure it's going to be run and correct, they are that targeting the hash. But if there is a logic or business rule that they are going to call a get links, it means receive a list of links. These are not deterministic. So it means a few agents can end up with a different result. So what is the recommendation, Eric and Guillaume there? It is better to not do that, or a developer can do that with a little bit conscious and consequences. So some suggestions or recommendations there.
Do what?
To write any non-deterministic logic inside the validation.
You can't. You can't do it. It won't let you. Because there's no get links. You can't do get links with inside validation. That particular HTK call is disabled inside a validation callback.
Must get also.
Must get is the only thing you can do.
You can do.
It's the only thing you can get from. So we did this on purpose to protect developers from making non-deterministic calls, because otherwise validation is not validation. I think part of what's hard to think about here is, and it would be better if we had a bunch of use cases and examples for each one of this, because it's hard to think about it in the abstract. And I think the thing to think about is the validation that you would do for things that are like countersigning type things. Like what we did with countersigning is we pushed that validation into the subconscious, so developers didn't have to do this. But before we had validation of countersigning in the subconscious, when we were working on it for HoloFuel, then you would do stuff during your validation, which is you would check to see, did this person also sign this? And so you look for the headers of the person who signed a transaction, and you look at both people's sets of headers and you see if they both actually signed it. And that's how you can confirm that they did that. And you can also check to see, did they do something else that they shouldn't have done? Did they sign some other thing that would have been invalid to have signed? And so I hope that gives a little bit of the flavor of what you can check. But you can't go and check, oh, did anybody go? Well, I mean, you can go and see if somebody created a link. Like you can say, when you create this element, you must also create a link. So you can go check that. You can look and see, did that also get put to the chain? Right? There's that kind of thing that you can do, because the integrity of the system is, when I create this entry, I also create a link from here to here so that people can query it. And that's part of what you could validate. But that should be deterministic, because you should be able to see that it was done, because you can do a must get.
Thank you.
Oh,
Please.
if I could just ask a clarifying question there. I think I'm getting it, but I want to check my understanding. So you don't want to have non-deterministic call. You don't want the validation itself to be non-deterministic. It either needs to return a thumbs up or I don't know, right? But in the I don't know case, the implication is that at some later point, you would get the call back again, right? And then you could make a you can make a call at that point and say, do I know now? And either validate or not, or I don't know. Is that?
That's exactly right. And if you look in the logs, what you'll see is if somebody does a must get and the must get fails, what you'll see is that there's a record of a dependency, unmet dependency. And that gets recorded. And then so the Holochain knows to try this again because of that unmet dependency.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I was curious how that callback, what triggers that subsequent callback, right?
Yeah. The fact that it failed is what triggers it.
Yeah, but somebody's remembering that is the point, and that's
And the Holochain subconscious is doing exactly that. Guillaume.
awesome.
That's exactly right. Just a point. So the options are it's valid, I don't know, or it's invalid.
Mhm.
Right? Like if you actually do get it and it's invalid, then that,
Right.
but just perfect.
So you have an answer, yes or no, or I don't know. Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Beautiful point you arrived, because exactly before continue talking about the operation, again, I wanted to show this one, that generally what is the status of the any validation, which is here. Validation callback result can be valid, it means the operation is valid. Rejected, it means not valid. And abandoned, it means, I think it is I don't know now or something. Or validation.
Yeah,
sorry,
same
it
as
was this one. Yes.
Remember what we said is you go and you look for, you try again, but the subconscious has to say, okay, I'm not going to keep trying. If you at some point it's going to abandon trying to validate a particular DHT op if nobody is ever answering it back.
Great.
So I mean, we don't know that it was valid. We don't know that it was rejected, but we did finally abandon it at some point.
That's it.
So this is out of scope for today's meeting, but I did watch the Holochain-in-Action on the countersigning. And it was a wonderful session, but it really only talked about the happy path. And it didn't talk about some of the failure modes. And in particular, the failure mode of what happens if you don't know whether somebody signed it or not, because it timed out or whatever. So I think that I'd like to have a follow-up conversation or hear more about the countersigning implementation in the presence of those failure modes because those are the tricky cases I know from when I implemented two-phase commit. It's like, yeah, it's what happens when you get into these states where you don't know whether somebody signed it or not. So you can't assume they did or they didn't. But that tends to block progress. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Let's go. Eric, you want to mention something?
I was just going to say that is exactly, you're exactly right. That is the hard part. And it is the commit process does actually take that into account. And because there's a timeout, there's an assumption that if you don't know by a certain point in time, you assume that it wasn't done. And then you have to retry the whole thing over again. Because there's a commit window. When you start it, you basically say, this is how long the window is going to last. And if I don't get it by that point in time, I'm done and I'm going to have to retry my commit later. And you have to kick that back up to the application.
Okay. Yeah, but one of the agents might have actually committed it and signed it. And from there, and then they lost, network partition, whatever, they lost contact, right? So you're talking about presumed abort, which is one of the resolutions of that. But then there's implications of that if that presumption
on the other
is not
side
correct for all agents. Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
Anyway, I didn't mean to rat hole on that topic, but I am very interested in the robustness of the countersigning because it's such an important feature. And what can you count on in the subconscious? I want to count on the subconscious handling those cases, but if there's things I need to know, then that's
Thank you, Steve. So we can also open more about validation in countersigning at the end if there is interest or we would like. But I would like to go back to again validations. So let's again continue quick review to see what's happening. If there is a create entry, registration agent activity, store element, and store entry. So again, we know element is the combination of a header and entry. So then I would like to go to register agent activity. It means one time this function is going to be called on a create entry with the register agent activity. I would like to go there to see what's happening there and why we need to do that Is there any example or something, or is there anything we can talk about register agent activities here? The thing is receiving is valid right now, it's empty, and it is receiving assigned header hash. So generally the register agent activity is the header that is the footprint of the agent activity. Really quick, when any agent does operation, so it means the element is going to be created, which is a header and entry. Entry is not a must. We have a video for data structure, it is there. Please go to channel and see if you would like. So header is a footprint of the agent. It's going to anyway publish to the DHT. So it is a agent activity, that is header sign. But if the action or the element has any entry, if the entry is private, it's going to be located in the local chain, which we are calling it source chain, is not going to be in the DHT. If it's going to be in the DHT, it's going to be in the StoreEntry. We are going to take a look. But this one is an agent activity. Okay.
So what you would validate in the so what you would do in your validation in here is you would validate, is the agent behaving appropriately? You would not validate in here, is the content of the data appropriate? Right? So let's say, for example, that you're only allowed to post 3 entries a month. This is where you would do it. You would check to see what is the date of the headers, and if they posted more than the 3rd entry, then you would say no, invalid. You can't do that in any other place, because in other places you don't necessarily, or it's not as efficient to do that. You don't have the information of all the rest of the things that the person did.
Mm-hmm. And another, okay, is there any question about Eric mentioned? I have something more here. Can I say, for example, in a mutual credit accounting, one of the way we are validating, yes, Ian, please, I would love to hear from your mouth.
No, like the example that you were going to put is exactly one of the reasons why this kind of validation is so important. So go ahead.
I'd love to hear from your mouth, please. Why do you need?
Okay, sure. So one of the problems, okay, so imagine we are coding in-branch application, so Goro, some mutual credit application, whatever. And I have here a transaction, right? And I have to validate whether this transaction was valid or not, right? So in some sense, I have to get the previous balance and then check that the previous balance plus the transaction equals the final balance, right? That's more or less it. The problem is, imagine if, sorry, and the way that you would do that most likely would be to, in the mutual credit transaction entry, you will have the header hash of the last transaction, right? Because you're saying something like, hey, here is my latest transaction. This is my newest transaction, right? So you can just do a get on that and like just check that the balance is okay. So that's it. You have a mutual credit transaction, header hash of the previous transaction. But now, what if between those 2 transactions, that agent committed a new transaction, right? So imagine we are in header 0, first transaction, header 3 is second transaction, but header 1 is also transaction, right? How can we, this is like a soft fork. You're like saying latest transaction was the first one, which is valid. And later on, you're saying the latest transaction is the first one, which is valid actually. Like if you run the validation, you do the get, it's going to be valid as well. And the only way that you can prevent that is to do that hash bounded agent activity queries, which is what Eric was talking about. So in the register agent activity, you would say from this transaction hash to this last, you're saying this is your last transaction? Let me check. From the point in time in which you committed this to the point in time you say you did not do any transaction, get everything and filter. Is this the only transaction? Good. This was a bit complicated, but I think like the sense is a bit that one.
That is great. Thank you again. really quick, maybe this version. If you are designing and architecting any application, that you need to have a sequence of the action of agents, and you need to query that the sequence is right. That's it. Because header is a footprint of the agent activity. You can easily query that, hey, are you forking? The sequence action is in order or is aligned or not. One of the best plays, the best hack that you can see the architect is in mutual credit or any transactional application that you need to see, hey, it was your first, second, third, fourth, you spend this amount, that amount, you receive this one and that. That's it. So I just want to mention. Am I right, Gian? Did I?
Amazing, yeah. And for example, in things like chess, with elemental chess, that's also strictly necessary, because you have to, anything that has to do with creating a customized time chain, it might be a chain of transactions, it might be a chain of moves in chess, will need to do that kind of pattern at some point, right?
Great. So let's go to the next one, which is validate entry, to see how the validate entry can be different than the validate element, when to use, and to see is there any use case that we can see. So let's go and see what else we have here. Where is it? Here, it's the one. So again, I think I share the screen again. So do you see my screen? So we talked about the register agent activity here. So we have a store entry. A store entry is this one. Inside the store entry, it is the store element and a store entry. So in the store element, we have an element. In the store entry, we have a header, signed hash, and entry as a hash. I want to understand what is the difference, because element here, it is the sign header hash, and element entry, which is entry again. Entry, you can imagine content. So in the validation ops, sorry, here, here we have a header, sign header hash, and entry as an entry. So would you please explain me what is the difference between a store element and a store entry? Because it looks similar, because the element, it is the combination of the header and entry, and a store entry also, which is receiving header as a sign hash of the header and entry.
Yeah, that's a little funny. I'm a little curious about why that was chosen. I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that. The real difference is the context of who's doing the validation, right? It's that base over there in the diagram. And so the thing is that so I'm not quite sure why they pass the data through in that different way. Because it seems like they could have just passed it through as an element. So it's a good question to ask. But the real difference is, that when the store element is being called, that you are the header person. You're the person who's responsible for the header. And when the store entry is being called, that you're the person who's responsible for the holding the entry. That's the difference. So the difference in what you would do is if that context is a different context of validation. I believe that's the right way to think about it. But I might be wrong about this, right? I mean, I'm here also learning. I haven't been connected into this part of the code for a while. So
that's good. Harlan, I see your hand. I would like to ask this question and continue with Harlan. Element is a logical topic. It means we are not going to have a specific or a standalone hash for element. Element is the logic of a combination of a header and entry. That's it. Am I right? We do not have a specific hash for element. We have hash for header. Please. It is the question.
So I think the difference is that in the entry case, there's actually an entry, whereas in the element case, there may or may not be an entry. And so if you look at the difference, an element is an option entry. It's a maybe entry.
Element has just for sure has header, but the entry, it is like always. Entry is optional for sure. So
yeah, and it's not optional in the other case.
In the entry, it is not, but we are receiving this one.
You actually have an entry. Mm-hmm. Because the thing is, in the store element, what might be being stored is any kind of header, any kind of entry might be being stored. I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also the answer. Anybody has the answer again? My question. Element. It is just a logical. Or do we have anything as a stored as a hash as an element?
In any place that we are seeing the hash of the element, actually we are referring to the hash of the header.
That's it.
So yeah, there is no, like, element and header are really close actually.
So let me actually tell you guys as a warning, almost, there's a lot of discussion going on in the core team in the Department of Names department about the word element and header and entry. And so we're actually looking for better words for that, because header is really bad. There should actually be no such thing as a header. Header is just actually a name that comes from having done an implementation of a chain. And really we should be talking about, like, what we're talking about is events and some people content. Really, yeah, and actions.
Even action content, yeah.
So there's this topic about that, and so the element is also it's also too generic. Really, the point is more like there's either an event or an action, and so talking about the header, it's like it's not very strong. I'm just saying that this is problematic as a name, and it doesn't help you think about it right. And we're trying to find better ways to think about it and try to land that before things go to beta, but I'm not quite sure what the current status is.
I love it, Harlan. Let's go to it. But I always, even in the data structure video, I kind of not renaming, just mapping element to event, header to action, and entry to content. So because especially after receiving operation for a validation, I believe, okay, it is event. Any event can for sure have one action, but the action can involve some content or not. That's it. Like it was event. This one was action. Can be sound or not sound. But if I quiet, there is no sound as a content. Sorry, Harlan.
So we've got two ops that we were just talking about, StoreElement and StoreEntry. If I'm storing an entry, then I'm also storing an element, in my understanding. And so I would expect to get two separate validation callbacks, one for the StoreElement and one for the StoreEntry, ?
That's right, but be careful. Two different people.
Yeah. Depending on the neighborhood of the header or the neighborhood of the entry.
The people that are the neighborhood of the entry are going to validate the store entry. The people that are the neighborhood of the header are going to do the store element. And the people that are the neighborhood of the agent public key are going to do the register agent activity. Because we are talking about these first two, but it's always the three.
So clearly, again, I think, I'm going to put in a maybe description or a blog again, because really important. Who receive what to validate? To validate element, the neighborhood of the header hash, number one. Number two, the validator for entry, that neighborhood of the hash of the entry or content. So the agent activity, the neighborhood who are close to the hash of the publisher agent ID of the publisher. That's it. Yes. Great. Is that clear, guys? Wow.
Totally simple.
Helped, but I'll just say that knowing who is receiving the call is helpful. What I really care about is what are the types of validations that make sense to do, given that I'm the recipient of this call. And that includes, some are handled automatically by the subconscious. And we had a wonderful example with the mutual credit, anything that requires a strict ordering, financial transactions, chess moves, the StoreElement validation, those are the kinds of validations it makes sense to do there. But, additional information about what are the nature of the validations that make sense to do in those circumstances would also be super helpful.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think so. When the ops stuff came out, I was searching in the docs for where the validation and where the examples are, and we don't have good ones in the documentation. And I think that doing this, because also we've thought through, there's a reason for each one of these, and Guillaume, you're pointing to that, but we really have to write that up really clearly in the docs, and I will make sure that that gets done.
Thank you. So if there is no question, I would like to share and continue the rest of the topic. We are about to wrap up almost anything. And so we review StoreElement entry. We see a little bit different. So register update, it means if the update entry is going to be happen, register agent activity is always there because it's the footprint of the agent we talked. A StoreElement, it is always there, it seems. As you can see, a StoreEntry are not somehow, because, for example, delete entry has just the header hash that we can also right now call it action. The action is delete old entry. If we can say entry also content, we can say delete a content. So there is no new content. It is just operation. That's it. So we can say in a register delete, as we can say, there is the signed hash as the operation, the delete. But what is the signed hash in the register delete? The hash of what? Because original header is here. It means the original header of the action of deleting an original entry. And what is the signed hash?
If you click on the signed hash, that's actually the header, right? So this is not the signature. This is the delete header together with its hash, together with its signature.
I see. I see. It means the hash of the operation, the delete operation.
No, that's the header.
The header.
Yeah. That's the delete header, right? So you have two headers. When you're deleting something, you have the header that is deleted and the header that deletes it.
I see.
Right?
Yes. I really would love that the remaining one day happen. So original header means the original entry that was deleted and the original entry that's being deleted. Ah, it is interesting. So let me make it big. So let's review to see what we saw for the validate. Now up, need to go back here. So in the register delete, it means if we delete entry. So we know what it is the header. It is the original header. What is the original header? So we can say, so either the header create or header update. This header both create a new instance of entry. Original, it means if a few times we update, it is the first one for the first time that we can create or update the entry. It was. Am I right?
Didn't understand the question, sorry.
So what is that one? The clear question is that one. What is this? What is this?
That's the header that's being deleted.
The header that's being deleted means the latest header, anything that happened for that entry.
Not anything. When you don't delete an entry, you delete a header.
Okay.
So that's the header that's being deleted. Right? You do the delete entry and you pass a header hash. That, Eric, that may also have to go to the department of name department. It's quite weird that you delete an entry and you pass the header hash. Anyway.
Wait, what? Why?
So when you call delete entry, you can't delete an entry. You delete headers.
Headers.
Okay, look. So let's go back to what a header is and why you think that it's the case. So remember that the real difference between a header and an entry is that is if you think about speaking, there is the thing that you say, and then there is the context of the speaking. So the speaking and the spoken. So that what you said is one thing, and the speaking is like I spoke today, and what I'm talking about is relevant to this other thing. So the header is always the context of what is being spoken. And so because the spoken, the entry that you're deleting, somebody may have said the exact same thing before. You can't delete the spoken. You can only mark that this speaking that I did before, I'm now saying that is no longer valid, i.e. I'm deleting that act of speaking. And so that's what you have to pass in as your delete.
Right, but what I mean is we may have to rename it to delete action or delete or because delete entry, like you can't delete an entry.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Anyway.
So in Holochain and DHT topic, it means if there is a sequence of event, we create entry, we imagine update entry, and then we again update and update the entry. So the entry is going to move, and there are some headers. The entry that you are going to delete, actually, there is nothing to delete the content. Entry means content. You just header, just imagine it is the action. You just point the action, the latest action on that content that, hey, just ignore this one. That's it. We do not touch the content. We just touch the header or actions, the latest one, actually. Oh, this mapping the meaning between header element and entry to this, it's a little bit, always tricky, but still we are putting effort. So I think I can continue, go to others, but I don't know. Is it enough for today, for this session, or should we postpone? What is your energy? What is your feeling, guys?
I think this is really great. It's really, to me, registered a weakness in documentation that we really do need to improve. So I'm really grateful for it. I actually do have to jump. So I'd say thanks if you want to keep going, but I've got to jump.
Others, because create we review, agent activity we review, delete is fantastic. The only thing which is update, we can also a few sentences about update. That's it.
Yeah, and good to go. Like if we do 5 minutes more and we review high level the other ones, it may be clear what everything is about.
Guillaume, let me share my screen and give you the gear and permission. Do it really quick.
Okay, so without any detail, thanks, Eric, as always.
Thank you, Eric. Do you have the project open, or I can share my screen?
No, I don't.
Wait.
If you can.
Then you are going to control my mouse. No, I cannot do any more. Wait. So please go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's see. So we went over StoreElement, StoreEntry. In the StoreElement, you would basically check that this is where you would do something like, okay, is the previous action that was done before this element this kind of action or whatever. You normally don't put a lot of validation inside the StoreElement. In StoreEntry, you would validate the contents of the entry, right? That's quite basic. In RegisterAgentActivity, you would validate that the thing that is updated and the new updated thing are coherent, right? So imagine if a tweet can only be updated to be longer than the previous one, this is where you would check. Okay, is the new thing longer than the old thing, right? It's a different thing than validating only the tweet, right? If you would validate only the tweet, it would be here. If you would validate the update, it would be here. RegisterDelete, you are going to validate that something can be deleted, right? That's the basic gist. This entry is the one that's being deleted. So maybe if you say only the tweets that have 100 characters and more can be deleted, this is where you would say it, right? In RegisterAgentActivity, here is where you would validate that this new activity for this agent, which is a new header, is coherent with with all the other elements that agent has committed. So in mutual create transactions, in what we were talking about before, in chess moves and things like that, where you have to take into account the full chain or parts of an agent's chain, that's where you would do it. And then register create link. Imagine I have a type of link that can only go from a path to a transaction, right? This is where you would do that. This is where you would say, is the base a path? Correct. Is the target a transaction? Correct, right? This is where you would validate that a link goes from one certain type of entry to another one. And RegisterDelete link, this is where you would validate that some link can be deleted. So imagine if we are doing a mutual create transaction and deleting a link actually means, I don't know, rejecting an offer, right? So maybe only the author of the offer can delete the link, right? Something like this. This is where you would do it. Right, and one of the important parts here, and this is a real hint for developers, is the different data that you get inside each of these. So, for example, for a link, you're going to get a store element for a link, right? And from this element, you could derive the base, the target, and whatever. But here it's much clearer, right? So here you already have the create link, the base, and the target. So it's like, oh yeah, if I have to validate that the base is of a certain type and the target is of a certain type, it's much better to do it here because it's quicker, right? Rather than do it on StoreElement, you're going to do a bunch of masquettes and things like that, right? So normally, as a rule of thumb, if you do your validation in the place that is like you have more data for your validation, that's good enough, right? That was it. I don't want to do any more detail right now, but I think it was important to get big picture also of everything that can go on in the system. Hope that was helpful.
That
Yeah,
is
thanks,
great.
Jim.
If there is no question, I would say let's finish the recording without any more extra topic. Thank you. I love you. See you later and another time.